Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Oh, it causes me to tremble, tremble.
Well, hello everybody. My name is Jordan. I'm one of the pastors here at Memorial, and I'm going to share with you a few thoughts on Good Friday. This Good Friday, I had been invited by a friend of mine to preach at an African American church. They have a tradition called the Seven Last Words, which is seven different preachers speak on one of the phrases from the cross and the crucifixion narrative. And this can become like a sort of a Royal Rumble event that they all upstage each other, and normally they save the most charismatic and the best speaker until last. And as a token white guy, they had given me the first word to say, so I was kind of looking at it, and I had done a little bit of preparation. And my opening line, my opening gambit for my sermon there would have been, looking at the crowd here, looking at the array of speakers who are so much more gifted and talented than me at preaching. I kind of feel like that guy at weddings that walks around with a tray of canapes between the ceremony and between the reception starting. That was just there as a little token to provide a little something of sustenance before the main event happened. But instead of that, I'm here sitting in front of an empty church. It's just me and Hogan and Dylan. And so we're going to have a few thoughts here from Good Friday. But before we do that, I'm going to read the crucifixion narrative from Mark's Gospel, starting in chapter 15 and verse 16. And the soldiers led him away inside the palace, that is, governor's headquarters. And they called together the whole battalion, and they clothed him in a purple cloak, and twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on him, and they began to salute him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they were striking his head with a reed, and spitting on him, and kneeling down in homage to him. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of his purple cloak, and put on his own clothes on him, and they led him outside to crucify him. And they compelled a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming from a foreign country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross. And they brought him to the place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him and divided his garments among them, casting lots for them to decide what each should take. And it was the third hour when they crucified him. And the inscription and the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." And with him they crucified two robbers, one on his right and one on his left. And those who passed by derided him, waving their heads at him and saying, "Aha! You would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. Save yourself and come down from the cross." So also the chief priest with the scribes mocked him to one another, saying, "He saved others, but he could not save himself. Let the Christ, the King of Israel, come down now from the cross, that we may see and believe that those who are crucified with him also reviled him." And when the 6th hour had come, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. And the 9th hour Jesus cried with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And some of the bystanders heard it saying, "Behold, he is calling Elijah." And some ran and filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink, saying, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come down to take him." And Jesus uttered a loud cry and breathed his last. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion who stood facing him saw that this was his last breath, he said, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." There was also women looking on from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of James, the younger of Joseph, and Salome. When he was in Galilee, they followed him and ministered to him. And there were also many other women who came up to him in Jerusalem. That Good Friday, the original Good Friday, is a story of darkness, it's a story of loneliness, and it's a story of defeat. And when Jesus breathed his last breath, the scriptures tell us that darkness came over the whole land, even though it was the middle of the day. Jesus was lonely. He was on the cross by himself. The only people that surrounding him were criminals, Roman soldiers. His closest followers had all but deserted him, bar a few of the women who were his closest followers. And for the first early followers of Jesus, it would have felt like defeat. They had heard stories of other Messiah figures who claimed to be the one that were sent by God to overthrow the Romans and to restore Israel to its prominence and to its power. They would have thought that with the execution of Jesus, that they had backed the wrong horse, that this was it, this was game over, this was defeat. There was darkness, there was loneliness, and all seemed to have been defeated. The other disciples that were not at the feet of Jesus, only the brave women were, that they were quarantined by fear. They were hiding in rooms by themselves, worried that the destruction that came to Jesus was going to come to them. They were isolated from each other, and they were locked away, protecting themselves, fearing for their lives. A lot of that sounds very similar to a lot of what we are feeling and experiencing today. We may be feeling fearful, we may be feeling lonely, we may be feeling defeated and not sure where hope is and if it is at hand. And I think there is a very interesting parallel to that very first Good Friday and to the Good Friday we're experiencing now. The first followers of Jesus were locked in houses with one another, and you too will be watching this on YouTube or Facebook in your house with your family. A small group of believers gathered together there because it is not safe to be gathered in a large group together. And it also makes me think of the global church and how so many of our brothers and sisters in Christ across the world, that this is a regular feeling for them, that they live their lives in fear of persecution. Not from viruses, but from governments, from rebels, from other religious groups. Friends and brothers and sisters in North Korea, in northern Nigeria, in Sri Lanka, all in the last year have experienced immense, unimaginable persecution. Good Friday can also be a cause of hope. We think of 1998, when famously Bill Clinton was involved in helping to broker a peace agreement in Northern Ireland that put the end to a 50-year bloody civil war there. And it was the first glimmers of hope between the Protestants and the Catholics, that they could have a pathway and a blueprint of how to move forward together as a unified nation. We may be feeling similar fears, similar pains, similar discomforts than what our earliest friends and Christians believed on that first Good Friday. It is unusual, it feels uncomfortable, we may not have the same rhythms that we normally have, but let us this Good Friday remember that this feeling of discomfort, this feeling of pain, this feeling of anxiety is so like what the first believers and followers of Jesus felt on that day that Jesus was crucified. So often we want to rush to the empty tomb and to the resurrection story, but we fail to really grasp the unimaginable defeat, pain, anguish, and loss that the very first followers of Jesus would have felt and experienced on that Good Friday after seeing their friend and the one that they had followed for years crucified on a Roman cross. So this Good Friday, let us remember the fear and the uncertainty that has been true for the Christian faith throughout history. That it went from 12 people in a room, scared for their own life, to a religion that has spread across all corners of the known world today. But even still today, we have brothers and sisters who face persecution for their faith in countries in every continent of the world. So we should remember the fear and uncertainty of history. We should also seek solidarity, that in times of fear, Christians have drawn together, they have provided for one another, and they have said, how can we help our fellow humans? How can we be people of light in society when things seem dark and when things seem bleak? How can we bring the light and healing of Jesus into that situation? So let us think of our global church family. When we can't meet together this Good Friday and this Easter Sunday, there are Sundays all over the world where Christians don't feel safe to gather together. Let us remember them today on this Good Friday, as we cannot gather together publicly. Let us look around at our family, those who are sitting next to you on the couch, or those that may be far away and we can only FaceTime or Zoom with them over this Easter holiday. Let us remember that why they are important to us and what they give to us in our life. But ultimately, this Good Friday, I think it is an important reminder that as Christians, we cannot just simply rush to Easter Sunday and the empty tomb. I think that misses the most powerful thing about the Christian faith, is that we have a faith that is robust and willing to engage and sit with pain. It is not a faith that just veneers over it and says, we believe in the afterlife. But God gives us permission to say, come and meet me in my pain, in my suffering, in my discomfort. We have full permission to bring that to God and for Him to minister to us in that. On Good Friday, Jesus took on the pain and sin of the world onto the cross. And today, with all the uncertainty we face, we may feel like we have the weight of the world on our shoulders, and we're not too sure what tomorrow looks like. But the hope of the Easter and the hope of the empty tomb is coming.